you are sabotaging yourself right now. It's a harsh truth, but it's the foundation of our conversation today. Think about the last time you put something important off. That project deadline looming, that difficult conversation you needed to have, or even just that workout you promised yourself. You felt that familiar pang of anxiety, that nagging voice whispering later. What if I told you that voice isn't just laziness? What if it's a complex interplay of your brain's wiring, a battle between instant gratification and long-term goals? This isn't about willpower. It's about understanding the deep cognitive mechanisms at play. The vast majority of people believe procrastination stems from a lack of discipline or poor time management. They try to force themselves through sheer grit, only to find themselves more frustrated and defeated. This approach is fundamentally flawed because it ignores the actual science. We're talking about a phenomenon that affects nearly everyone, yet few truly understand its roots. Studies show that up to 80% of adults identify as procrastinators. That's an astonishing number, suggesting this is not an individual failing but a widespread human experience. Imagine your brain as a tiny, ancient kingdom inside. Two powerful rulers constantly vie for control. One is the impulsive king of now, demanding immediate pleasures and avoiding any discomfort. The other is the wise but often ignored chancellor of later, focused on long-term well-being and future success. Procrastination is the impulsive king winning the battle. He offers immediate relief from the unpleasantness of a task. The task feels daunting, boring, or anxiety-inducing. The impulsive king says, "Don't worry about it. Let's do something fun instead. We can deal with that later." This internal tug-of-war is incredibly powerful. It's not a moral failing, it's a neurological one. Your brain is hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain in the present moment. This ancient survival mechanism helped our ancestors, but in our modern world, it often leads us astray. The science behind this is fascinating. Researchers have been delving into the cognitive mechanisms and neural substrates underlying procrastination. They're uncovering the intricate pathways in our brains that dictate our choices between doing something now or deferring it. One groundbreaking study from Wiley Interdisciplinary Reviews Cognitive Science in 2019, authored by Zhang and colleagues, illuminated these hidden processes. They explored how our brains process rewards and threats, and how this influences our decision to act or delay. This research points to a critical disconnect. The later self, the one who will benefit from completing the task, feels like a stranger. We often feel empathy for our present self, wanting to alleviate their current discomfort. But the future self, who will actually face the consequences, feels distant and less real. Think about it. The discomfort of starting a difficult task is immediate and tangible. The reward of completing it, or the pain of not completing it, is often delayed. Our brains, especially the parts responsible for emotional regulation and reward processing, are more attuned to immediate sensations. This is why New Year's resolutions often fail. On January 1st, you feel motivated. Your future self, the healthier, more accomplished one, seems very real. But by January 10th, the immediate comfort of staying in bed or eating that cookie outweighs the abstract promise of future benefits. The neural circuits involved are complex. They include areas like the prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like planning and self-control, and the limbic system, which processes emotions and rewards. When the impulsive king's signals are strong, they can hijack the rational decision-making processes. Consider the case of Anya. Anya was a talented graphic designer, but she consistently struggled with starting new client projects. She would spend hours researching fonts and color palettes, anything to avoid the actual design work. Her income suffered, and her stress levels were through the roof. She tried all the usual advice: to-do lists, time blocking, motivational quotes. Nothing stuck. She felt like a failure, constantly battling a force she couldn't comprehend. Her later self was begging her to act, but her now self was paralyzed by the perceived difficulty. The scientific insights revealed a different path for Anya. It wasn't about forcing herself. It was about understanding that the initial activation energy for a task felt overwhelmingly large to her brain. The immediate discomfort of facing that mountain was too much. The researchers found that procrastination isn't just about avoiding tasks. It's about avoiding the negative emotions associated with those tasks. The feeling of dread, boredom, or anxiety triggers an avoidance response. Your brain interprets these feelings as threats. This is where the concept of self-regulation comes into play. It's our ability to manage our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to achieve our goals. Procrastination is a failure of self-regulation, but not in the way most people think. It's not a lack of self-control, it's a misapplication of it. We often try to control our behavior directly by forcing ourselves to do the task. But the science suggests we need to manage our emotions first. If the task elicits strong negative emotions, our self-regulation systems are overwhelmed. The study by Zhang et al. Highlights the role of temporal discounting. This is the tendency for people to prefer smaller, immediate rewards over larger, delayed rewards. Procrastination is a prime example of extreme temporal discounting. The immediate relief from avoiding a task is perceived as more valuable than the future reward of completing it. Imagine you're offered $100 right now, or $1,000 in a year. Most people would take the $100 now. Now imagine it's $100 in a week, or $1,000 in a year and a week. The choice becomes less clear, but the immediate reward still holds sway. Procrastination amplifies this effect. The reward of not doing the task is immediate. The punishment of not doing it is delayed and often uncertain. Our brains are not wired to prioritize long-term consequences over immediate feelings. The neural pathways involved are particularly interesting. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, for instance, is crucial for integrating emotional information with decision-making. When this area is less active, or when emotional signals are very strong, the impulsive king's influence grows. Think of it like a thermostat. Your brain has a set point for emotional comfort. When a task threatens to push you outside that comfort zone, your internal alarm system goes off. Procrastination is the brain's attempt to turn down the heat by avoiding the source of discomfort. This is a critical insight. It means that trying to power through when you feel dread is often counterproductive. It's like trying to reason with a panicked animal. You need to address the panic first. The scientists discovered that individuals who procrastinate often experience higher levels of stress and lower levels of well-being. This might seem obvious, but the underlying mechanism is key. The stress isn't just from the unfinished task, it's from the internal conflict and the constant feeling of guilt. This internal conflict creates a vicious cycle. You feel bad about procrastinating, which makes you feel more anxious about the task, which makes you want to avoid it even more. It's a self-perpetuating loop of misery. The research also touched upon the concept of affective forecasting. This is our ability to predict how we will feel in the future. Procrastinators often misjudge how bad they will feel if they don't complete a task. They underestimate the negative consequences. Conversely, they often overestimate the difficulty and discomfort of starting the task. This distorted perception fuels the avoidance. They imagine the task as an insurmountable obstacle, when in reality, it might be much more manageable. The key takeaway from this scientific exploration is that procrastination is not a character flaw. It's a natural consequence of how our brains are wired to manage emotions and rewards. Understanding this is the first step to breaking free. Now let's look at the common mistakes people make when trying to overcome procrastination. These are the traps that keep people stuck, year after year, repeating the same patterns. The first mistake is trying to eliminate procrastination entirely. The goal isn't to never feel the urge to delay. It's to manage that urge effectively. Trying to be perfect will only lead to disappointment and reinforce the belief that you are incapable. The second mistake is relying solely on willpower. As we've discussed, willpower is a finite resource. When faced with strong emotional aversion to a task, willpower alone often crumbles. It's like trying to build a dam with your bare hands against a tidal wave. The third mistake is focusing on the task itself, rather than the emotions surrounding it. If a task makes you feel anxious, simply telling yourself to just do it won't address the underlying emotional distress. You need to manage the feeling, not just the action. These mistakes are understandable because they stem from the common, but incorrect, understanding of procrastination. We've been taught that it's about being lazy, so we try to be less lazy. But the science tells a different story. The real breakthrough comes when you shift your focus from controlling your actions to managing your emotions. This is where the concept of self-regulation truly shines. It's about creating a mental framework that allows you to navigate those uncomfortable feelings. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to learn a new language. You can try to memorize every word and grammar rule, but if you're constantly afraid of making mistakes, you'll never speak. You need to learn to tolerate the discomfort of imperfection. The science suggests that the initial hurdle is often the perceived emotional cost. The task feels like a giant, insurmountable wall. But what if you could make that wall seem smaller? What if you could reduce the immediate emotional pain associated with starting? This is where the concept of present self versus future self becomes crucial. We need to bridge the gap between these two versions of ourselves. We need to make our future self feel more real and important to our present self. One way to do this is through implementation intentions. This is a technique where you create a specific plan for when and where you will perform a task. For example, instead of saying, "I will exercise," you say, "I will go to the gym at 6 p.m. tomorrow." This sounds simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It shifts the decision-making process. Instead of having to decide if you will exercise, you've already made the decision when and where. It reduces the cognitive load and the opportunity for procrastination. The science behind implementation intentions is that they create a mental cue that triggers the desired behavior. It links a specific situation to a specific action, bypassing the need for conscious deliberation and the potential for emotional avoidance. Another powerful strategy is task decomposition. This involves breaking down large, overwhelming tasks into smaller, more manageable steps. The emotional barrier to starting a small step is significantly lower than the barrier to starting a massive project. When you break down a task, you're not just making it easier to do, you're making it less emotionally daunting. Each small step completed provides a sense of accomplishment, which can then fuel motivation for the next step. It's like climbing a staircase one step at a time, rather than trying to leap to the top. The research highlights that the feeling of being overwhelmed is a major driver of procrastination. By breaking down tasks, you reduce that feeling of overwhelm. You create a series of mini victories that build momentum. The key is to focus on the first small step. What is the absolute smallest thing you can do to get started? It might be opening a document, writing a single sentence, or making a phone call. The goal is to overcome the initial inertia. This is where the concept of temptation bundling can also be effective. This involves pairing a task you want to do with a task you need to do. For instance, you only allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast while you are exercising. This strategy leverages the brain's reward system. By linking an enjoyable activity with a less enjoyable one, you make the less enjoyable task more palatable. You're essentially bribing your present self with a small reward to get through the more difficult task. The scientific literature on procrastination emphasizes that the emotional component is paramount. If you can learn to manage the negative emotions associated with a task, you can significantly reduce your tendency to procrastinate. This is not about suppressing emotions. It's about acknowledging them and then choosing a different course of action. It's about developing emotional resilience. Consider the story of David. David was a writer who struggled with writer's block for years. He would stare at a blank page, feeling a crushing sense of inadequacy. The fear of not being good enough was paralyzing. He tried everything: writing prompts, writing groups, even hypnotherapy. Nothing provided a lasting solution. He believed he just wasn't cut out to be a writer. Then he learned about the emotional drivers of procrastination. He realized that his fear of failure was the primary obstacle. He wasn't avoiding the act of writing. He was avoiding the feeling of being a bad writer. He started using the strategy of task decomposition. His task of writing a novel became write one sentence. Then it became write 2 sentences. He focused on the smallest possible action. He also implemented a rule. He would only allow himself to read articles about his favorite hobby after he had written for 15 minutes. This temptation bundling created a small, immediate reward for engaging with his work. Slowly, the momentum began to build. The initial dread of the blank page started to fade. He wasn't suddenly a perfect writer, but he was writing consistently. His emotional discomfort lessened with each small step and each earned reward. Within 6 months, David had a completed manuscript. It wasn't a bestseller, but it was a testament to his newfound ability to manage his internal resistance. His measurable result was completing a project he had abandoned for over a decade. This illustrates the power of shifting the focus from the task to the emotional experience of the task. When you understand that procrastination is an emotional regulation issue, you can begin to implement strategies that address the root cause. The science from Zhang and colleagues provides a compelling framework for this. They highlight that the temporal gap between an action and its consequence is a major factor. Our brains are simply not evolved to prioritize long-term outcomes over immediate feelings. This is the paradox of procrastination. The more you try to force yourself to do something you dread, the more you reinforce the negative association with that task. You create a self-fulfilling prophecy of avoidance. The twist in this story, the unexpected truth, is that overcoming procrastination isn't about becoming a more disciplined person. It's about becoming a more emotionally intelligent person. It's about learning to be kind to your present self while still honoring your future self. The science reveals that the impulsive king in your brain is not your enemy. He is a part of your ancient survival mechanism. The goal is not to defeat him, but to negotiate with him. You need to offer him a better, more immediate reward for choosing the path of action. This means reframing tasks not as chores, but as opportunities to build a better future. It means recognizing that the discomfort you feel is temporary, and the rewards of overcoming it are lasting. The most common mistake, as we've discussed, is the focus on willpower. People believe they just need to try harder. But this is like trying to outrun a train by sprinting in front of it. You're fighting against your own biology. The second mistake is the all-or-nothing approach. People aim to never procrastinate again. This sets them up for failure. It's far more effective to aim for progress, not perfection. Small, consistent wins are the path forward. The third mistake is the belief that procrastination is about laziness. This is a judgment that only fuels shame and guilt, making the problem worse. It's about understanding the cognitive and emotional mechanisms at play. So what is the one single action you can take today, right now, to begin shifting this pattern? It's incredibly simple, yet profoundly effective. Find one task that you are currently putting off. It doesn't have to be the biggest or the most important. Just pick one. Now break that task down into the smallest possible action. What is the absolute first, minuscule step you can take? It might be as simple as opening a new document, writing down a single idea, or sending a one-sentence email. Your mission for today is to complete that one tiny step. That is it. Do not worry about the rest of the task. Do not worry about how much further you have to go. Your only focus is on completing that single, minuscule action. This action is designed to be so small that it bypasses your internal resistance. It's too small to trigger significant anxiety or dread. It's a way to trick your brain into getting started. The impact of this small action is not about completing the task. It's about proving to yourself that you can take action, even when you feel the urge to delay. It's about building a tiny bit of momentum. This is the beginning of a new mental framework. It's a framework built on understanding your brain, not fighting it. It's a framework that acknowledges the power of emotions and teaches you how to manage them. By focusing on the smallest possible step, you are essentially offering your impulsive king an easy win. You are showing him that taking action can be painless. This creates a positive feedback loop. The science tells us that consistency is key. Taking one small action today builds the foundation for taking another small action tomorrow. Over time, these small actions accumulate and lead to significant progress. Remember Anya, the graphic designer? Her first step was to open her design software. That was it. She didn't have to create anything, just opening the program. Remember David, the writer? His first step was to write one sentence, just one. This is not about grand gestures. It's about small, deliberate actions that build upon each other. It's about retraining your brain's response to challenging tasks. The beauty of this approach is that it's sustainable. It doesn't require immense willpower or a radical personality change. It requires a shift in your understanding and a commitment to small, consistent action. The scientific evidence from Zhang et al. And others in this field strongly supports this idea. The immediate reward of overcoming the initial inertia, even for a tiny task, can be enough to shift the balance. This is the beginning of rewiring your brain. It's about creating new neural pathways that associate action with a sense of accomplishment rather than dread. So identify that one task, determine the absolute smallest, most insignificant first step, and then do it right now or as soon as you finish listening. This single action is your stepping stone. It's your bridge across the temporal gap. It's your way of making your future self feel a little more real to your present self. This is where the journey truly begins. It's not about willpower. It's about understanding, it's about strategy, it's about kindness to yourself. And it's about taking that first, impossibly small step. Now let's explore how this principle plays out in a real-life scenario. I want to introduce you to Sarah. Sarah is a woman in her late 40s, a dedicated mother of 2 teenagers and a successful project manager at a mid-sized tech company. For years, she'd been wanting to start her own online consulting business. She had the expertise, she had the passion, but every time she sat down to actually do something, a wave of overwhelm would hit her. She'd stare at her laptop, thinking about building a website, creating marketing materials, or developing her service packages. The sheer volume of what needed to be done felt insurmountable. This procrastination wasn't born from laziness, but from a deep-seated fear of not doing it perfectly. She detailed herself she needed more research, more planning, or that the timing wasn't quite right. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day where she'd spent 3 hours scrolling through website templates instead of actually writing content, she stumbled upon this idea of the minuscule step. She was skeptical, of course. How could opening a document possibly lead to a thriving business? But she was also desperate. Her internal resistance was a formidable wall. It whispered doubts and anxieties, convincing her that any attempt would be flawed. The thought of building a website felt like scaling Mount Everest without any gear. But the idea of opening a blank page, that felt almost achievable. So the next morning, instead of diving into the daunting task of website design, Sarah opened a new document. She didn't even title it. She just let the blankness stare back at her. Her instruction to herself was simple: write one sentence about her ideal client. Just one sentence. It took her 10 minutes. 10 minutes to craft. My ideal client is a small business owner who feels overwhelmed by digital marketing and needs a clear, actionable strategy. That was it. It wasn't brilliant prose, it wasn't a groundbreaking insight. But she had done it. She had taken a step. The next day, she repeated the process. She opened another document and wrote one sentence about the core problem her ideal client faced. The following day, one sentence about the desired outcome. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to fill those documents with single sentences. Each one was a tiny pebble dropped into a vast, empty space. The tension in Sarah's life wasn't just about starting her business. It was about the internal conflict. The part of her that yearned for independence and fulfillment was constantly at war with the part that feared failure and judgment. This war had been raging for years, leaving her feeling drained and defeated. Her decision to focus on the minuscule step was a strategic ceasefire. It was an agreement with her own anxious mind. Instead of demanding a full-scale invasion of productivity, she asked for a single scout. This scout's mission was not to conquer, but simply to report back. The resolution began to unfold gradually. After a week of writing single sentences, Sarah found herself with a collection of disparate thoughts. But now, instead of a blank canvas of impossibility, she had building blocks. She could see the emerging shape of her business. The next step she took was to combine 2 sentences into one paragraph. Then, she dared to write 3 sentences about a potential service offering. Each step was still small, still manageable, still designed to sidestep the paralyzing fear. The measurable result wasn't immediate profit, it was a shift in her internal landscape. The wall of overwhelm began to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of agency. She was no longer a passive observer of her own inaction. She was an active participant, one tiny step at a time. Within 3 months, Sarah had a functional website. It wasn't perfect, but it was live. She had a clear service offering and a basic marketing plan. She had even booked her first client. The impact was profound. She felt a sense of pride and accomplishment she hadn't experienced in years. Now let's delve into how this mechanism works within our brains, using a metaphor I hope will resonate. Imagine your brain is like a vast, ancient forest. In this forest, there are 2 main paths. One path is wide, well-lit, and smooth. This is the path of immediate gratification, of comfort, of avoiding discomfort. It's the path of later. The other path is narrow, overgrown, and winding. It's shrouded in shadows and often leads to challenging terrain. This is the path of growth, of effort, of confronting difficulty. It's the path of now. When a task feels overwhelming, our brain, being inherently efficient and protective, defaults to the widest, easiest path. It says, "This looks hard, let's go the other way, the comfortable way, the later path." This is our primal survival instinct at play. It's trying to keep us safe from perceived threats, and that perceived threat is often the discomfort of effort or potential failure. Now, procrastination is like a thick, thorny vine that grows across the narrow, winding path. This vine is fueled by our fear and anxiety. The bigger the fear, the thicker and more impenetrable the vine becomes, effectively blocking us from the path of growth. What happens when you focus on the minuscule step? You're not trying to hack through the entire vine with a machete. That's too much effort, too much risk of getting pricked. Instead, you're taking a tiny, sharp twig and carefully, deliberately, poking a small hole in the vine. This tiny poke doesn't clear the whole path, not by a long shot, but it creates an opening. It's a small breach in the defenses. And here's the magic. That tiny poke sends a signal to your brain. It's a signal that says, hey, something is happening. Movement is occurring. This signal is like a tiny spark of light in the shadowed forest. It's enough to catch the attention of the squirrels and birds, the little creatures of your mind that are usually hesitant to venture too far from the main, well-trodden path. They see this flicker of activity, this tiny opening, and curiosity begins to stir. The real power of the minuscule step is that it's too insignificant to trigger a full-blown defense response from your later path. Your brain doesn't perceive it as a major threat. It's like trying to scare a lion by whispering. It doesn't work, but poking a tiny hole in the vine, that's just a minor disturbance. And with each tiny poke, you create another small opening. You're not clearing the path, you're simply creating a series of tiny, manageable breaches. These breaches allow more of that curious energy, that spark of light, to penetrate deeper into the forest. The scientific understanding behind this involves the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for planning and decision-making, and the amygdala, our fear center. When faced with a daunting task, the amygdala goes into overdrive, signaling danger. This hijacks the prefrontal cortex, making it difficult to focus and act. The minuscule step, however, is so small that it doesn't fully activate the amygdala. It's like offering a toddler a single, small cookie instead of a whole birthday cake. They can handle the cookie without a meltdown. This allows the prefrontal cortex to engage, to process the small action, and to experience a tiny sense of accomplishment. This accomplishment, however small, releases a minuscule amount of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. This positive feedback loop, even at a micro level, starts to retrain your brain. It begins to associate taking action with a positive feeling, rather than dread. Now, for the unexpected twist, the paradox that might shift your perspective entirely. We often think of growth mindset as being about pushing through challenges with sheer willpower, about embracing difficulty. And that's partly true. But the paradox is that to truly embrace difficulty and foster growth, you must first embrace something that feels incredibly easy. The twist is this: the most powerful way to cultivate resilience and courage in the face of big challenges is to practice the art of the ridiculously small. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? We think we need to build muscles by lifting heavy weights, but the real foundation for lifting those heavy weights is built by consistently doing a single, easy push-up every single day. The unanswered question from earlier was about how to overcome that initial inertia when the task feels so enormous that even the smallest step seems impossible. The paradox offers the answer. The smallest step isn't just a strategy to get started. It's a practice in self-compassion. It's an act of kindness towards your struggling self. When you feel paralyzed by the enormity of something, the tendency is to judge yourself, to feel frustrated, to amplify the negative self-talk. This only thickens the thorny vine. But by choosing the minuscule step, you are choosing to approach yourself with gentleness. You are saying, I see you are struggling. I am not going to demand greatness from you right now. I am simply going to ask you to do this one tiny thing. This act of self-compassion is the secret ingredient that allows the minuscule step to work its magic. It disarms your internal critic. It softens the resistance. It's the gentle rain that nourishes the soil, allowing the tiny seeds of action to sprout. So, the paradox is that true strength and resilience are cultivated not by confronting the giant head-on, but by mastering the art of the microscopic. It's about understanding that the path to overcoming big obstacles is paved with an endless series of tiny, seemingly insignificant victories. This is not about lowering your standards, it is about redefining what constitutes progress. Progress is not always a giant leap. Often, it is a series of small, deliberate steps, and the most profound growth comes from learning to take those steps, even when every fiber of your being wants to remain still. Think about it, if you are afraid of heights, you don't start by bungee jumping. You might start by looking out of a second-story window, then a third, then a fourth. Each step is minuscule, yet it builds confidence and prepares you for the next, slightly larger step. The science from Zhang et al. On procrastination and self-regulation highlights that the immediate reward of overcoming even minor inertia is crucial. The paradox amplifies this by showing that the most potent reward is often the feeling of self-kindness that accompanies taking that minuscule step. This is where the growth mindset truly takes hold. It's not about believing you can do anything instantly. It's about believing that you can learn, adapt, and grow through consistent, manageable effort. It's about trusting the process of incremental progress. So the next time you face a daunting task, remember Sarah. Remember her single sentences. Remember the ancient forest and the tiny poke in the thorny vine. And most importantly, remember the paradox, that the path to embracing big challenges is paved with the gentlest, smallest steps. This understanding is not about finding a quick fix. It is about adopting a sustainable mental framework. It is about learning to work with your brain, not against it. It is about building momentum, one minuscule action at a time, and discovering the profound impact of self-compassion in the journey of growth. The question that remains, of course, is what happens when even the minuscule step feels like too much, when the vine seems utterly impenetrable and the spark of light refuses to ignite. What then? We will explore that next time. You know, it's one thing to talk about these concepts, to understand them intellectually, but it's another entirely to see them in action, to witness the transformation firsthand. It makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it? It's like reading about climbing Mount Everest versus actually feeling the thin air in your lungs and the bite of the wind on your face. I want to tell you about a woman named Elena. Elena was in her late 50s when I met her. She had always been a caregiver, first to her parents, then to her own children, and then to her grandchildren. Her life was a tapestry woven with the needs and schedules of others. She was incredibly organized, efficient, and deeply loving. But for years, she had harbored a quiet dream, a whisper of a desire that she had consistently pushed aside. This dream was to learn to play the cello. It wasn't a sudden whim. It had been a persistent hum beneath the surface of her busy life since her teenage years. She remembered hearing Yo-Yo Ma play Bach's cello suites on the radio and feeling an ache in her soul, a longing to create that profound, resonant sound herself. But life always intervened. There were always more immediate priorities, more pressing demands. The cello sat in her imagination, a beautiful, unattainable object. As she approached her late 50s, a new urgency began to stir within her. She started to feel a pang of regret, a fear that this dream might slip away entirely, becoming just another unfulfilled wish. She tried to dismiss it. She told herself she was too old, that her fingers wouldn't be nimble enough, that she didn't have the time to dedicate to such a pursuit. The internal dialogue was relentless, a chorus of doubt and practicality. One day she was browsing in a local music shop. She hadn't planned to. She was just picking up some sheet music for her granddaughter's piano lessons. Her eyes, however, were drawn to a display of cellos. They gleamed under the shop lights, their rich wood promising warmth and depth. She walked over, her heart thumping with a mixture of excitement and dread. She ran her fingers over the smooth curves of a cello's body. It felt solid, real, and impossibly beautiful. She spoke to the shop owner, a kind, elderly gentleman with a gentle smile. He patiently answered her hesitant questions. He didn't try to sell her anything. He simply shared his own love for the instrument. As she stood there holding a cello bow, a profound decision began to form. It wasn't a dramatic, earth-shattering moment. It was quiet, almost imperceptible. But it was a decision nonetheless. She decided she would learn to play the cello. The sheer magnitude of the goal, however, threatened to overwhelm her. She pictured herself struggling with difficult fingerings, wrestling with complex bowing techniques, spending hours practicing scales. The old patterns of self-doubt and overwhelm began to creep back in. She could already feel the familiar paralysis setting in. This is where the minuscule step, the practice of self-compassion, and the growth mindset began to truly intertwine for Alina. She didn't march into the music shop and buy the most expensive cello. She didn't sign up for intensive daily lessons. She didn't even tell anyone about her decision at first. Instead, she started with something incredibly small. She decided that her first step would be to simply find a cello teacher. That was it. No playing, no practicing, just research. She spent one evening for 20 minutes looking online for cello instructors in her area. She found 3. That was her accomplishment for the first day. The next day, her minuscule step was to send an email to one of those teachers. She didn't write a long, elaborate inquiry. She simply asked if they had any availability for beginner adult students. She hit send, and then she allowed herself to feel a small flicker of satisfaction. It was a tiny victory, but it was hers. Over the next few weeks, Alina continued this practice. Her minuscule steps were never grand gestures. They were always manageable, almost laughably small. One day, it was to watch a 5-minute YouTube video on how to hold a cello bow. Another day, it was to research the different types of cello strings. Then, it was to practice holding the cello bow for 3 minutes. She would tell herself, "Just hold the bow, that's all. Just hold it." The beauty of this approach was that it bypassed her ingrained tendency towards overwhelm and self-criticism. Her inner voice, the one that usually screamed, "You'll never be good enough," found no purchase. How could it criticize her for holding a bow for 3 minutes? It was too absurd. What happened, however, was profound. Each minuscule step, each act of gentle self-direction, chipped away at the mountain of perceived impossibility. It was like a sculptor working on a massive block of marble. They don't try to carve the entire statue at once. They make small, precise movements, gradually revealing the form within. Alina's decision to learn the cello wasn't just about acquiring a new skill. It was about reclaiming a part of herself that she had long suppressed. It was about proving to herself that it wasn't too late, that her dreams still held value, even in her later years. She eventually found a teacher, a patient woman named Clara. Clara understood Alina's approach. She didn't push her, she celebrated the small wins. Alina's first cello was a modest instrument, rented from the music shop. She didn't feel the pressure to own something expensive. Her focus was purely on the process. Her practice sessions were short. Sometimes, it was just 10 minutes of bowing exercises. Other times, it was 5 minutes of trying to produce a single, clear note. The science of procrastination, as highlighted by Zhang and colleagues, points to the importance of reducing the perceived effort and increasing the immediate reward. Alina's minuscule steps did exactly that. The effort was so small that it felt almost effortless. And the reward, the feeling of having completed her tiny task, was immediate and palpable. This wasn't about instant mastery, it was about building momentum. It was about convincing her brain, through consistent, gentle action, that progress was possible. It was about rewiring her neural pathways, replacing the old patterns of avoidance with new ones of engagement. After about 6 months of this consistent, gentle practice, something remarkable happened. Alina was playing a simple piece, a beginner's arrangement of a folk song. It wasn't perfect, there were still squeaks and hesitations, but as she played, she felt a surge of emotion. She looked at her hands, her fingers moving across the strings, and a tear rolled down her cheek. She realized that she was actually playing the cello. She was creating music. The dream that had seemed so distant, so impossible, was becoming a reality, not through some Herculean effort, but through a series of tiny, consistent acts of courage and self-compassion. The measurable result was not just her ability to play a simple melody. It was the profound shift in her own self-perception. She felt lighter, more capable, and more alive than she had in years. She had proven to herself that age was not a barrier, that self-doubt could be overcome, and that dreams, even long dormant ones, could be realized. Now, let's delve into the mechanism behind this. How does this seemingly simple approach to minuscule steps and self-compassion actually work in the brain? Imagine your brain is like a vast, ancient forest. Within this forest, there are well-worn paths, representing your ingrained habits, your automatic responses, your deeply held beliefs. These paths are easy to travel because they've been used so many times. When you want to learn something new or change a behavior, it's like trying to forge a new path through dense undergrowth. It's difficult, it's slow, and it requires a lot of energy. Your brain, being incredibly efficient, naturally gravitates towards the well-worn paths. Procrastination is the brain's way of saying, "This new path looks too hard. Let's stick to the familiar, comfortable, old path." The research by Zhang and colleagues on procrastination and self-regulation suggests that the key to overcoming this is to make the new path seem less daunting. It's about finding ways to reduce the immediate perceived cost of taking action. Now, here's a metaphor I've been thinking about. Imagine your brain is a sophisticated but slightly stubborn gardener. This gardener has been tending the same plot of land for years, planting the same familiar crops. They have a mental map of this plot, and they know exactly how to care for these crops. When you decide you want to grow something entirely new, say exotic orchids, the gardener looks at the existing plot and thinks, "Orchids. That's completely different. It requires different soil, different light, different care. This is going to be a lot of work. I don't know if I can do it. Maybe I'll just stick with my potatoes." This is your internal resistance, your fear of the unknown. The minuscule step, combined with self-compassion, is like giving the gardener a tiny, perfect little watering can and a single, exquisite orchid seedling. You don't hand them a whole greenhouse and a manual on orchid cultivation. You say, "Just water this one seedling, that's all you need to do today. And if it looks a little droopy, that's okay. We'll figure it out together." The gardener, presented with such a manageable task, thinks, "Okay, watering a single seedling. I can do that, it's not overwhelming." And they do it. They feel a small sense of accomplishment. "I watered the orchid." The self-compassion comes in when the seedling doesn't immediately flourish. Instead of the gardener berating themselves or thinking, "See, I knew I couldn't do this," they say, The seedling looks a bit sad. Maybe it needs a little more shade, that's okay. I'm still learning." This gentle approach prevents the gardener from abandoning the project altogether. Over time, with each tiny watering, each moment of gentle observation, the gardener's confidence grows. They start to notice subtle changes in the orchid. They might experiment with moving it to a slightly different spot. Each small success, each bit of learning builds upon the last. Eventually, the gardener starts to see a new bloom. This is a significant reward. And here's the twist, the unexpected paradox. The more you focus on the smallest possible action, the more you actually build the capacity for larger actions. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? We think we need to tackle big things head-on to build strength. But the opposite is often true. By consistently engaging in tiny, manageable actions, you are, in essence, training your brain to be more resilient, more adaptable, and more willing to take on challenges. Think about it. When you take that minuscule step, you are not primarily focused on achieving the ultimate goal. You are focused on the act of doing. You are experiencing the immediate reward of completing that small task. This creates a positive feedback loop. The more you experience these small wins, the more your brain associates the new activity with positive feelings and a sense of competence. The old, well-worn path of procrastination is still there, but it's becoming less appealing. The new path, the one you're forging with your minuscule steps, is becoming more inviting. It's not that the undergrowth disappears overnight. It's that you're learning to navigate it with increasing ease and confidence. And the self-compassion, it's the lubricant that keeps the tools of your brain from rusting. It's the gentle hand that guides the gardener, preventing frustration from shutting down the entire operation. It ensures that when you inevitably encounter a weed or a wilted leaf, you don't give up on the entire garden. You simply tend to the issue with care and continue. The unanswered question from our last segment was, what happens when even the minuscule step feels like too much? This is where the gardener metaphor becomes even more poignant. Sometimes, even watering a single seedling feels impossible. The gardener might be exhausted or overwhelmed by other pressures. In those moments, the minuscule step becomes even smaller. It might be simply looking at the seedling, or it might be acknowledging with kindness that today is not the day for watering. It's about recognizing your own capacity in that moment. It's about understanding that the path forward isn't always linear. There will be days when the progress is imperceptible. The twist here is that the most profound growth doesn't come from always pushing through, but from knowing when to rest and how to be kind to yourself during those moments of perceived inertia. The science from Zhang and colleagues also touches on the role of emotional regulation in self-control. When we are overwhelmed, our emotional state can hijack our cognitive abilities. Self-compassion acts as a powerful emotional regulator. It calms the nervous system, allowing us to return to a state where we can even consider a minuscule step. So when even the smallest action feels too much, the minuscule step is to simply be present with that feeling, without judgment. It's to acknowledge the difficulty, to offer yourself a moment of grace, and to trust that the desire to grow is still within you, even if it's dormant for a moment. It's about tending to the gardener's own well-being, recognizing that a tired gardener cannot cultivate a thriving garden. This is not about accepting defeat. It is about a deeper understanding of sustainable growth. It's about realizing that sometimes the most effective action is inaction, or rather, a different kind of action, the action of self-care and self-acceptance. The growth mindset doesn't demand constant forward motion. It demands consistent learning and adaptation, which includes learning how to navigate periods of low energy or high resistance. And that's the real power of this approach. It's not just about achieving external goals. It's about cultivating an internal landscape where growth is not a source of anxiety, but a natural, gentle unfolding. It's about building a relationship with yourself that is founded on understanding, patience, and unwavering kindness. Even when the path feels overgrown and the seedling seems to struggle, you continue to tend to your inner garden with love. And that, my friend, is where true transformation begins. There's a subtle shift that happens when we start to truly embrace this idea of a growth mindset, especially after 40. We begin to see the patterns, the recurring themes that hold us back. And often, these patterns are so ingrained, so familiar, that they feel like just part of who we are. But when we look closely, with that growing self-compassion we've been cultivating, we can identify some common missteps that keep us from flourishing. Recognizing these is the first, and often most challenging, step toward genuine progress. One of the most significant mistakes people make is mistaking comfort for progress. We get accustomed to our routines, our familiar ways of thinking and doing, and we tell ourselves that this stability is a good thing. It feels safe, predictable, and avoids the discomfort of the unknown. But true growth rarely happens within the confines of our comfort zones. It requires a willingness to step into uncertainty, to embrace the awkwardness of learning something new, and to accept that initial fumbling is a necessary part of the process. This isn't about seeking out unnecessary hardship, but about understanding that stretching ourselves is essential for expanding our capabilities and our sense of self. Another pervasive error is the belief that we are somehow fixed in our abilities or personality traits. This is the very antithesis of a growth mindset, yet it's so deeply embedded in our societal conditioning. We might say things like, "I'm just not a creative person," or "I've always been bad at math." These are self-limiting beliefs that act as invisible walls, preventing us from even attempting to develop new skills or perspectives. The science of neuroplasticity clearly shows our brains are capable of change throughout our lives. Believing we are immutable is a choice, a powerful one that can stifle our potential before we even give it a chance to emerge. It's like having a seed with the potential for a magnificent tree, but deciding it will only ever be a tiny sprout because that's all it has been so far. The third major pitfall is the tendency to focus solely on the outcome rather than the process. We become so fixated on achieving a specific result, a promotion, a weight loss goal, mastering a new skill, that we overlook the invaluable lessons learned along the way. When we only value the destination, any deviation or setback can feel like a complete failure, leading to discouragement and a desire to quit. This external focus makes us vulnerable to the whims of fortune and can overshadow the internal development that is the true hallmark of growth. The journey itself, with all its challenges and small victories, is where the transformation truly takes root. It's the effort, the learning, the resilience built that truly matters. So, how do we move beyond these deeply ingrained habits and actively cultivate a growth mindset, especially when the resistance feels so strong? It requires a deliberate, step-by-step approach, one that acknowledges the challenges but provides a clear path forward. Think of it as recalibrating your internal compass, guiding you toward expansion rather than stagnation. The first crucial step is to become a mindful observer of your own thoughts and reactions. This isn't about judgment, but about gentle awareness. When you notice yourself thinking, "I can't do this," or "this is too hard," pause, take a breath, ask yourself, is this thought serving me? Is it based on evidence, or is it a familiar, old story? This simple act of pausing interrupts the automatic negative loop and creates space for a different response. It's like noticing a storm gathering and choosing to find shelter rather than being swept away by the wind. Next, we intentionally reframe those fixed mindset thoughts into growth mindset statements. If you catch yourself thinking, "I'm not good at public speaking," reframe it as, "Public speaking is a skill I can develop with practice." If the thought is, "I failed at this," transform it into, "I learned valuable lessons from this experience." This isn't about denying reality, but about choosing a more empowering and constructive interpretation of events. It's about shifting from a passive victim of circumstances to an active architect of your own learning journey. This reframing needs to be practiced consistently until it becomes a natural inclination. The third step involves actively seeking out challenges that are slightly beyond your current comfort zone. This isn't about jumping off a cliff, but about taking on tasks that require you to stretch and learn. Perhaps it's volunteering for a project that utilizes a new skill, or engaging in a conversation with someone who holds a different perspective. The key is to approach these challenges with a spirit of curiosity and a willingness to be a beginner. Embrace the feeling of not knowing everything. That uncertainty is precisely where growth happens. It's the fertile ground for new knowledge and abilities to take hold. Following closely is the practice of focusing on effort and process, rather than just the end result. When you embark on a new endeavor, celebrate the small steps you take, the effort you invest, and the strategies you employ. Acknowledge the dedication it takes to show up each day, even when progress feels slow. This shift in focus makes the journey itself rewarding and builds resilience. It teaches you to value the learning and the development, not just the eventual prize. This is where intrinsic motivation truly thrives. Then, we must actively seek and learn from feedback, viewing it as a gift rather than a critique. Instead of becoming defensive when receiving constructive criticism, ask clarifying questions. Try to understand the perspective of the person offering the feedback. See it as valuable information that can help you refine your approach and accelerate your learning. This requires a level of emotional maturity and a genuine desire to improve, understanding that feedback is a tool for growth, not a personal attack. It's about separating the message from any potential delivery imperfections. Finally, cultivate a sense of gratitude for the opportunities to learn and grow, even when faced with setbacks. This doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means acknowledging the positive aspects of your journey, the lessons learned, and the progress made, no matter how small. Gratitude shifts your perspective from what's lacking to what's present, fostering a more optimistic and resilient outlook. It's about appreciating the process of becoming more than you were. Let me share a couple of quick examples to illustrate the tangible impact of these steps. Consider Sarah, a woman in her early 50s who had always believed she was technologically challenged. She had avoided anything more complex than her smartphone for years, convinced it was a lost cause. When her grandchildren started showing her new apps and online games, instead of shutting down, she decided to try the reframing technique. She started telling herself, "I can learn this. It might take time, but I can figure it out." She began by asking her grandchildren to show her one specific thing each visit, focusing on the effort of learning. She celebrated the small victory of successfully navigating a new program or understanding a new feature. Within 6 months, Sarah wasn't just using her tablet to connect with family. She was actively participating in online book clubs, managing her finances online with confidence, and even exploring online courses for hobbies she had always dreamed of pursuing. Her initial fear of technology has been replaced by a quiet confidence and a genuine enjoyment of its possibilities. Her measurable result was not just increased tech proficiency, but a significant boost in her overall engagement with the world and a renewed sense of capability. Then there's Mark, a graphic designer who, after a significant career shift in his late 40s, found himself struggling to adapt to new design software. He felt a constant pressure to be an expert immediately, leading to procrastination on projects that required the new tools. He was stuck in the outcome-focused trap. Through a workshop on growth mindset, he began to consciously focus on the process. He started breaking down complex tasks into smaller, manageable steps. He actively sought out online tutorials and engaged with online communities to ask questions, embracing his status as a learner. He celebrated completing each tutorial, each successfully rendered element, rather than just the final project. He began to view mistakes not as failures, but as opportunities to learn shortcuts and more efficient methods. Within a year, Mark not only mastered the new software but became a go-to person for his colleagues seeking advice. His measurable result was a significant increase in his project turnaround time, a reduction in stress related to his work, and a portfolio that showcased his expanded skill set, leading to higher-paying contracts. He didn't just learn a new skill, he rebuilt his professional confidence. Now for that one single action you can take today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. It's incredibly simple yet profoundly powerful. It's about acknowledging one of those old, fixed mindset thoughts that pops up. The moment you hear yourself thinking, "I'm not good at this," or this is too difficult for me. I want you to do this. Take a deep breath and then consciously say to yourself out loud if you can, or just in your mind, this is a learning opportunity. That's it. Just those 3 words. This is a learning opportunity. Repeat it every single time you catch yourself falling into that old, familiar pattern. It's a gentle but firm redirection. It's a signal to your brain that you are choosing a different path, a path of growth and possibility. It's the first, tiny seed you plant in your inner garden today, a seed of conscious choice and intentional development. As we continue to navigate the rich landscape of life after 40, remember that the most profound growth doesn't happen when we're constantly pushing against resistance. It happens when we learn to dance with it, to understand its rhythms, and to use it as a catalyst for our own evolution. The journey of cultivating a growth mindset is not about eradicating challenges, but about transforming our relationship with them. It's about recognizing that every perceived obstacle is an invitation to become more resilient, more capable, and ultimately, more fully ourselves. Keep planting those seeds of learning and watch your inner garden flourish in ways you never imagined.